Blood pooled on the cold concrete of a Dubai warehouse the last time my phone buzzed with that notification. 3 years of my life were stolen, culminating in a federal indictment and a bullet to the chest, all because of a college WhatsApp group. Now, breathing in the cheap lavender air freshener of my sophomore dorm, that exact same notification just chimed. Second chances aren't for revenge. They are for survival. This time, my classmates can take the fall. The phantom pain in my chest was so sharp, I practically threw myself out of the twin-sized dorm bed, gasping for air that felt like it was laced with copper and gunpowder. My hands frantically grabbed at my sternum, expecting to find the gaping, wet exit wound that had ended my life just moments, or rather, years ago. There was nothing, just the soft, worn cotton of my university t-shirt. My eyes darted around the room. The faded posters, the string lights dangling precariously over the mini-fridge, the distinct, artificial scent of lavender Febreze. I was back in room 312 of Oakhaven Hall. I scrambled for my phone, knocking a textbook off the desk in the process. The lock screen glared back at me. May 14th. It was exactly 3 weeks before the end of my junior year, before I could even process the impossible reality of time literally rewinding. The screen lit up with a banner notification. Connor Hayes added you to the group Global Ecom Scholars. My blood ran ice cold. My stomach dropped so violently I had to grip the edge of my desk to keep from collapsing. I stared at the green WhatsApp icon like it was a live grenade. In my previous life, that group chat was the beginning of the end. It started as an exclusive summer internship opportunity presented by Connor Hayes, the charismatic, golden boy president of the business fraternity. He promised 20 of us a fully funded summer in Dubai, working for a hyper-growth e-commerce startup, base pay, commission, free housing, and the kind of resume booster that would guarantee us Wall Street jobs by graduation. We had all signed up blindly. We handed over our passports for visa processing. We opened new bank accounts at Chase and Bank of America because the company needed specific routing parameters for international payroll. By mid-June of that past life, we realized we weren't interns. We were prisoners. The startup was a massive, transnational boiler room syndicate. They locked us in a heavily guarded compound on the outskirts of the city. Our passports were locked in a safe. We were forced, under threat of physical violence, to run sophisticated cryptocurrency romance scams and wire frauds, targeting the elderly back in the States. The bank accounts we had opened in our names were used to launder millions of dollars. When the FBI finally cracked the case 3 years later, they didn't see us as victims. Because we had signed the documents, because our names were on the LLCs, we were indicted as co-conspirators. I had tried to turn state's evidence. Connor, who had quickly risen through the ranks of the syndicate by selling us out, found out. The bullet I took in that warehouse was his way of tying up loose ends. Bzzzt. The phone vibrated again, pulling me back to the sunny reality of my dorm room. Connor Hayes. Welcome to the elite circle, guys. Only invited the top performers from Professor Higgins's macro class. Big things happening this summer. If you want to make $15K in 3 months and live in a luxury villa, say I. Immediate replies flooded in. Jenna Carmichael. OMG. Yes. I'm so in. Tyler Brooks. Let's go. Broke college student no more. Mia Thompson. Is this real? Count me in. Mia. My heart physically ached seeing her name. In the past life, Mia had been my best friend. She couldn't handle the psychological torture of the compound. 6 months into the nightmare, she threw herself off the third-floor balcony of our concrete barracks. I had held her hand as she bled out, while the guards simply dragged her away. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed at me to type a warning, to tell them Connor was a sociopathic trafficker leading them to the slaughter. But the memory of that bullet biting through my lungs stopped me. If I exposed him now, I'd sound like a lunatic. I had no proof. The fraud hadn't happened yet. If I made a scene, Connor would just paint me as hysterical, and the syndicate backing him might decide to silence me before I even left campus. I had to play this perfectly. I had to survive. I tapped the group settings. I didn't say a word. I didn't leave a dramatic exit message. You left this group. You deleted this chat. I immediately went into my phone settings and blocked Connor Hayes across every single platform: WhatsApp, iMessage, Instagram, LinkedIn. I didn't stop there. I logged into my Equifax and Experian accounts and put a hard freeze on my credit. If Connor had already skimmed my social security number from the university database, which I suspected he did in the original timeline, he wouldn't be able to open a shell company in my name this time. Less than 3 minutes later, a sharp, aggressive knock hammered on my dorm door. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I opened the door. Connor stood there, his trademark, perfect smile, not quite reaching his cold, calculating blue eyes. He was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a tailored navy polo that screamed generational wealth. "Hey, Ilara," he said, his tone dripping with fake concern. "Did your app glitch? You just dropped out of the chat." "No glitch," I said, keeping my voice utterly devoid of emotion. "I'm not interested, Connor." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Not interested. Ilara, this is a 6-figure run rate internship. You were complaining about your student loans just last week. I'm doing you a massive favor by slotting you in." "I got another offer," I lied, smoothly. "Local accounting firm. It's better for my CPA track." Connor stepped forward, crossing the threshold of my room just an inch. A subtle intimidation tactic I now recognized for what it was. "A local firm? You're going to push papers in a cubicle while the rest of the class is networking on yachts in Dubai? Don't be stupid, Ilara. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing." "Yeah," I thought, looking him dead in the eye. "Because you rarely survive it twice. My decision is final, Connor. Have a great summer." I didn't wait for his response. I shut the heavy wooden door right in his face, immediately throwing the deadbolt. Through the wood, I heard him scoff. "Your funeral, Davis," he muttered, before his footsteps faded down the hall. I leaned against the door, my legs shaking so violently I had to slide down to the floor. The game had changed. I was out of the trap, but the timer was ticking. By graduation, they would all be felons or corpses, and I was going to have a front row seat. Within 48 hours, I became a ghost on my own campus. Connor didn't just take my rejection. He weaponized it. By Tuesday, the narrative was set. Ilara Davis was a jealous, bitter sabotage artist who had been kicked out of the elite internship group for failing an imaginary background check. I felt the shift the moment I walked into the dining hall. The low hum of chatter dipped. Jenna Carmichael, a girl who used to borrow my notes in business ethics, openly rolled her eyes and turned her back to me. Tyler Brooks whispered something to a lacrosse player, pointing his chin in my direction. I kept my head down, carrying my tray to a solitary table by the window. Suddenly, a tray slammed down across from me. It was Mia. She looked stressed, a faint dark circle forming under her eyes. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed, leaning over the table. Good morning to you too, Mia, I said, stirring my lukewarm coffee. Don't do that. Connor said you threatened to report the internship to the dean because you didn't get the regional manager role. Are you out of your mind? You're trying to ruin this for all of us. I looked at my best friend, the girl I had watched die on dirty concrete. My chest tightened. I had to try, just once, to pull her back. Mia, listen to me very carefully, I said, dropping my voice to a whisper. Did Connor ask you for your passport yet? She blinked, taken aback. Yeah, for the work visa. Did he ask you to open a new bank account? At Chase, specifically. And did he ask you to list a random LLC as your employer on the application? Mia swallowed hard, looking defensive. It's standard corporate procedure, Alara. They use a shell company for tax purposes abroad. Connor's dad's lawyers set it all up. Why are you acting like a paranoid freak? Because it's a money mule setup, Mia. They are using your identity to launder money. When you get to Dubai, there is no startup. You are going to be trapped. Mia stared at me for a long, agonizing second. Then, a look of profound pity washed over her face. Connor was right. You really are having a mental breakdown. You need help, Ilara. She stood up, grabbing her tray. I already signed the NDA and the equipment deposit forms. My flight leaves June 2nd. I really hope you get your head straight by the time I get back. She walked away, and with every step she took, the invisible thread tying us together snapped. I closed my eyes. I tried, I told myself. I can't save someone who is fighting to stay drowning. I had to secure my own perimeter. If the federal authorities were going to sweep the entire graduating class in 2 years, I needed my paper trail to be bulletproof. I needed to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was entirely disconnected from the global ecom scholars. That afternoon, I walked off campus and straight into the dreary, fluorescent-lit office of Arthur Henderson, CPA. Arthur was a 60-year-old tax accountant who smelled like stale coffee and old paper. He was exactly the kind of boring, verifiable local employer I needed. I need a summer job, I told him, dropping my resume on his cluttered desk. I'll do data entry, file organization, tax prep, minimum wage is fine. But I need everything documented. W-2, direct deposit to my local credit union, and clock-in records. Arthur looked at me over his reading glasses. You're a junior at the university. Don't you kids usually go off to the city for fancy internships? I prefer stability, Mr. Henderson, and I type 90 words a minute. He hired me on the spot. For the next 2 weeks, I watched the trap snap shut around my classmates. Connor was a master manipulator. He organized team-building nights at the local bar, paying for everyone's tabs with a sleek black Amex. He bought them matching custom Patagonia fleeces with the fake company logo. He was creating a cult of personality, and they were worshiping at his altar. I watched them hand over their signed NDAs. I watched them fill out the banking paperwork. Every time I passed them in the library, I saw them looking up luxury apartment rentals in Dubai, picking out which sports cars they were going to rent on the weekends. On May 28th, the dorms closed for the summer. I packed my belongings into my beat-up Honda Civic. As I was loading the trunk, Connor strolled past, leading a group of 10 students, including Jenna and Tyler, toward an airport shuttle. He stopped when he saw me. He walked over, leaving his disciples behind. Last chance, Davis, Connor said, leaning in close. His voice was soft, devoid of the fake cheer he used for the others. Someone dropped out. I have 1 seat left on the Emirates flight. Get in the van, and all is forgiven. I looked at him, truly seeing the monster hiding beneath the frat boy haircut. I knew exactly what he was. A recruiter for the cartel. A boy willing to sell his own classmates into modern-day slavery for a cut of the profits. "I'd rather be dead," I said quietly. Connor's eyes went flat. The mask slipped, just for a millisecond, revealing the cold, dead gaze of the man who had shot me. "Suit yourself," he whispered. "Enjoy a life of mediocrity." He turned and got into the shuttle. The doors closed, and the van pulled away, carrying 20 of my classmates toward absolute hell. I got into my Honda, turned on the ignition, and drove toward Arthur Henderson's office. I was safe, but the real game was just beginning. By mid-June, my social media feeds were a curated exhibit of a billionaire's fever dream. Every time I opened Instagram on my lunch break at the accounting firm, the global e-com scholars were flooding the timeline. Jenna Carmichael posted a reel of herself, clinking champagne glasses on a yacht with the Burj Al Arab in the background. The caption read, "Building empires before we even get our degrees. Girl boss, Dubai life, giant e-com." Tyler Brooks posted photos of a matte black Lamborghini Urus, casually leaning against the hood, wearing a Rolex Submariner. The comment sections from our university peers back home were chaotic with envy. Freshmen were begging in the comments to find out how to apply for the next cohort, but I knew how to look closer. I had lived this lie. I sat at my desk in Arthur's quiet office, blowing up Tyler's Lamborghini photo on my desktop monitor. I zoomed in on the reflection of the car's glossy paint. There, warped but visible, was the unmistakable outline of a chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire, and the shadow of a man holding what looked remarkably like a rifle. I scrolled to Jenna's yacht video. I muted the obnoxious EDM music she had overlaid on the clip. I watched her eyes. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking slightly off-screen, terrified, waiting for a cue. The champagne glass in her hand was shaking so badly, the liquid was spilling over the edge. And when she turned her arm, just for a fraction of a second, I saw the dark purple bruising, shaped like finger marks, gripping her bicep. They were already in the compound. The social media posts weren't flexes. They were forced marketing. The syndicate required us to post weekly proof of success, to lure in the next batch of victims, and to maintain the illusion for our families back home, so nobody would report us missing. If you didn't meet your daily quota in the scam boiler room, you didn't eat. If you tried to ask for help on your monitored phone, you got beaten in the basement. I created an encrypted hidden folder on my hard drive, labeled Oakhaven Evidence. Every day, I screenshotted their posts. I downloaded the raw video files. I used online metadata extractors to strip the EXIF data from any photos they posted directly to WhatsApp or untracked blogs. The GPS coordinates never pointed to luxury hotels. The metadata always pointed to a dusty, industrial sector on the outskirts of Ras Al Khaimah, far away from the glittering skyscrapers of Dubai. I was building a dossier. The FBI would need a smoking gun to mobilize an international raid, especially since these interns were legally adults who had signed contracts and traveled willingly. The silence from Mia was the loudest part of my summer. She hadn't posted a single picture. I knew why. Mia had a strong moral compass. In the past life, she had outright refused to run the romance scams. She had refused to manipulate lonely widowers out of their pensions. Her refusal had earned her solitary confinement in a windowless room. On July 4th, while fireworks were popping off in my quiet suburban neighborhood, my phone vibrated on my nightstand. It was 3:14 a.m. I picked it up. A message on Signal. An encrypted app I had forced Mia to download months ago for gossip. Unknown number. Ilara. My heart hammered against my ribs. I typed back instantly. Ilara. Who is this? Unknown number. It's Tyler. Mia is in the hospital. Or a clinic. I don't know where we are. They took our passports. Ilara. You were right. Oh my God, you were right. They have guns. I sat up in bed, the blood roaring in my ears. The timeline was breaking. In the past life, nobody had managed to smuggle a burner phone or get an encrypted message out this early. The syndicate's digital security was usually airtight. Tyler must have stolen a phone from one of the low-level guards. Ilara. Tyler. Listen to me. Do not text this number again. If they catch you with that phone, they will kill you. Delete this app immediately. Unknown number. Help us. Please. Connor is one of them. He's watching us. Ilara. I am building a case. I have the metadata of your location. I am going to the feds, not the local police. The local cops are paid off. Hold on, Tyler. Just comply with them for now. Do whatever they say to stay alive. Do not try to escape. Over the wall, the 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing. They stayed on the screen for an agonizing 2 minutes. Then, the message came through. Unknown number. He's coming down the hall. I have to ditch the phone. Tell my mom I'm sorry. The account went offline. The status changed to user deleted. I sat in the dark, my hands trembling so violently, I dropped the phone onto the blanket. The nightmare was happening all over again, exactly as I remembered it. The suffocating heat of the compound, the screams from the basement, the sickening realization that we were entirely disposable. But this time, I wasn't locked in the dark with them. I was on the outside, and I was going to burn Connor Hayes' entire empire to the ground. The next morning, I didn't go to the accounting firm. I put on a blazer, loaded my encrypted flash drive into my purse, and drove 2 hours to the closest FBI field office in the city. I was going to introduce them to the global ecom scholars. Rain lashed against the brutalist concrete exterior of the regional FBI field office, mirroring the cold dread settling in my stomach. Security scanners, stern-faced guards, and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights replaced the chaotic energy of my college campus. This wasn't a movie. There was no dramatic music playing as I surrendered my phone and stepped through the metal detectors. There was only the terrifying reality that I was about to poke a sleeping dragon, armed with nothing but a USB drive, and the traumatic memories of a life that hadn't technically happened yet. After a grueling hour in a waiting room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, a door clicked open. Ilara Davis? Special Agent David Halloway was a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the late 90s. His tie was loose, his sleeves were rolled up, and his eyes held a permanent squint of skepticism. He led me into a windowless interrogation room, gesturing to a metal chair bolted to the floor. Your intake form says you have evidence of an international human trafficking and wire fraud syndicate operating out of Oak Haven University, Halloway said, dropping a yellow legal pad onto the metal table. He sounded exhausted. That's a heavy accusation for a college junior, Ms. Davis. Usually, when students come to us with wild conspiracies, it involves a bad grade or a stolen bicycle. I am not here about a bicycle, Agent Halloway, I said, my voice eerily calm. I reached into my purse, pulled out my encrypted flash drive, and slid it across the table. I am here about 20 American citizens currently being held hostage in an industrial compound in Ras Al Khaimah, United Kingdom of Arab Emirates. They are being forced to execute pig butchering, crypto scams, and romance frauds. And the recruiter who put them there is a student at my university. Holloway stared at the drive, then up at me, the condescending amusement drained from his face, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. He didn't touch the drive. "Explain," he demanded softly. I spent the next 2 hours laying out the entire operation. I didn't hold back. I couldn't tell him I had lived this nightmare in a previous timeline, so I framed my knowledge around intense digital forensics, deep web research, and Tyler Brooks' frantic SOS message. To make it impossible for him to dismiss me, I asked for his laptop. When he hesitated, I rattled off the exact penal codes they were violating. Holloway finally hooked the drive to a secure, air-gapped terminal. I opened the dossier I had built, organizing it for maximum impact. Evidence category file. Format and source FBI. Actionable significance. Geospatial metadata. Extracted EXIF data from unaltered WhatsApp image files. Proves the students are not in Dubai luxury suites, but at coordinates matching a known industrial sector heavily guarded by local militias. Financial routing screenshots of Chase and Buffet routing parameters provided by Connor Hayes demonstrates the preliminary stages of a money mule network. The LLCs match known shell companies flagged in previous federal fraud alerts. Distress signal encrypted signal logs. Time-stamped July 4th, 3:14 a.m. Confirms involuntary detainment, confiscation of passports, and imminent physical threats against Tyler Brooks and Mia Thompson. Recruitment ledger. Digital copies of the fake NDAs and internship contracts. Establishes Connor Hayes as the domestic recruiter and co-conspirator operating on U.S. soil, violating the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Holloway scrolled through the metadata, his jaw tightening. When he read the transcript of Tyler's message, "They have guns. Connor is one of them." He swore softly under his breath. "How did you know to track the metadata?" Holloway asked, leaning back in his chair, studying me as if I were a puzzle he couldn't solve. "This is professional-grade surveillance, Ms. Davis. Not the kind of thing a 20-year-old accounting major usually does in her free time. When my best friend is offered a job that sounds too good to be true, by a guy who wears a $5,000 watch but doesn't have a trust fund, I dig." I lied smoothly. "I recognize the red flags. I tried to warn them. They didn't listen. Jurisdiction in the UAE is complicated," Holloway admitted, rubbing his temples. "We can't just kick down a door in Ras Al Khaimah. We need the State Department, Interpol, and local authorities who are notoriously corrupt. If we move too fast and alert the syndicate, they will scrub the compound." My chest seized. I remembered the scrub. In my past life, when a local inspector got too close, the guards loaded us into the back of suffocating cargo trucks and moved us to a worse facility. 3 people died of heat stroke on that trip. "You can't let them move the students," I said, my voice trembling with genuine terror. "If they move them, you will never find them. You have to cut off the head of the snake here. You have to take down Connor Hayes." "We will," Holloway said, his tone shifting from skeptical investigator to fierce protector. "But to do that without spooking the overseas bosses, we need a domestic wiretap. We need to tie Connor's campus operation directly to the money laundering. And I need you to go back to Oak Haven and act like absolutely nothing is wrong." I looked at my hands. They were steady, but inside, my soul was vibrating. I was officially a federal informant. "I can do that," I whispered, September hit the campus of Oak Haven University with a wave of crisp air and golden leaves. To the outside observer, it was a picturesque start to the fall semester. Fraternities were rushing, the coffee shops were packed, and the library buzzed with the anxious energy of returning students. But for me, the campus was a graveyard. Connor Hayes returned 2 days before classes started. He looked like he had stepped off a GQ cover, deeply tanned, wearing a tailored linen suit, and driving a brand-new Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. He held court in the Student Union courtyard, surrounded by awestruck freshmen and fawning professors. I watched him from the second-floor balcony of the Student Center, an iced coffee sweating in my hand. "Elara!" I turned to see Dean Robertson, a jovial, balding man who always smelled faintly of peppermint, waving at me. He jogged up the stairs, slightly out of breath. "Have you seen Connor?" the dean asked, beaming. "The global econ program was a massive success. It's a shame you dropped out, Elara. Connor was just telling me how Jenna and Tyler secured permanent, remote executive roles. They're taking the semester off to stay in Dubai." My blood ran cold. Extended contracts. That was the syndicate's official cover story when the victims didn't return. "Wow," I managed to say, forcing a polite smile. "That's amazing. Is Mia staying too?" "Oh, yes. Connor said she's practically running their regional marketing division," Dean Robertson chirped. "It's a huge win for the university's prestige." I felt violently nauseous. Mia wasn't running a marketing division. Last I heard, she was in a makeshift clinic, broken and terrified, and the university was celebrating it. "If you'll excuse me, Dean Robertson, I have to get to work," I said, hastily retreating before my mask slipped completely. My job at Arthur Henderson's accounting firm had evolved from a summer gig to a part-time fall internship. It was the perfect cover for my real job, tracking Connor's domestic financial footprint for Agent Holloway. That afternoon, the bell above Arthur's door jingled, and the reality of the situation shattered the quiet of the office. It was Mrs. Thompson, Mia's mother. She looked a decade older than she had at our high school graduation. Her hair was disheveled, and she was clutching a crumpled tissue. She walked up to my desk, her eyes red and swollen. "Elara," she choked out, her voice cracking. I immediately stood up, rushing around the desk to pull her into a hug. She collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder. "Mrs. Thompson, what's wrong? What happened?" "It's Mia," she cried, gripping my arms with bruising force. "She won't answer my calls. She only texts me once a week, and it doesn't sound like her. The grammar is weird. She asked me for $5,000 to cover a corporate tax fee so she could come home. Elara, you were her best friend. Please tell me you know what's going on." My heart broke into a million jagged pieces. The syndicate was using Mia's phone to scam her own mother. It was a classic escalation tactic. When the victims ran out of marks online, the bosses forced them to target their own families. "Mrs. Thompson, sit down." I guided her to a chair and poured her a glass of water. My hands were shaking, but my mind was operating with cold, clinical precision. "Do not send that money. It is a scam." "But it's her number." "Her phone was compromised," I lied, unable to tell her the horrifying truth just yet. "Her company got hacked. The FBI is looking into it. But you cannot send money, and you cannot tell anyone I told you this. Okay?" She nodded frantically, desperate for any lifeline. After I calmed her down and sent her home with a promise to investigate, I locked the front door of the firm. Arthur was out at a Rotary Club lunch. I had the office to myself. I booted up my dual monitors. Agent Holloway had given me specific parameters to search for within the local state business registry, utilizing my access to Arthur's professional database software. Connor wasn't just recruiting. Holloway suspected he was laundering his commission checks right here in town. I cross-referenced the Chase routing numbers Connor had used in the spring with newly registered limited liability companies in our county. Within 40 minutes, I found the bleed. Connor had set up a classic 3-tier laundering structure, arrogant enough to use a local registered agent. Layer 1. Placement. The offshore syndicate wired crypto-converted funds to a shell company called Apex Consulting LLC, registered in Delaware, but operating out of a P.O. box in our college town. Layer 2. Layering. Apex Consulting issued consulting fees to a secondary entity, Hayes Enterprise Holdings, which was directly tied to Connor's social security number. Layer 3. Integration. Connor used the clean money from Hayes Enterprise to pay for his tuition, his G-Wagon, and massive donations to the university's alumni fund to keep the administration looking the other way. I downloaded every ledger, every state filing, and every public transaction record. I encrypted the payload and sent it to Holloway via our secure drop. An hour later, my burner phone buzzed. Holloway, we got the warrant. The wiretap is live on Hayes's phone. We are moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 meant shaking the tree. The FBI needed Connor to panic and call his overseas handlers, establishing the definitive link for a federal indictment. And the person tasked with shaking that tree was me. The following Tuesday, I walked into the business college building with a singular mission. The air conditioning was freezing, but a bead of sweat rolled down my spine. I was wearing a wire. Agent Holloway's voice crackled softly in an earpiece so small it was practically invisible in my ear canal. Target is in Professor Higgins' office. Room 402. Keep him talking, Ilara. Don't push too hard. Let his ego do the work. Professor Higgins was the crown jewel of the Oak Haven Business Department. He was an adjunct who had spent 20 years on Wall Street before deciding to give back by teaching macroeconomics. In my past life, he was the one who personally recommended me for the Dubai internship. I had always thought he was just a clueless academic. Now, armed with the knowledge of how syndicates operate, I realized the truth. A college sophomore doesn't secure 20 fake corporate sponsorships without a faculty sponsor vetting the process. Higgins wasn't a bystander. He was the gatekeeper. I knocked on the heavy oak door of room 402. "Come in," Higgins' booming voice called out. I pushed the door open. Higgins was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, sipping espresso. Connor was lounging in a leather guest chair, looking utterly relaxed. When Connor saw me, his smile vanished, replaced by a guarded, predatory stillness. "Ilara Davis," Professor Higgins said, looking over his reading glasses. "To what do we owe the pleasure? You haven't been to my office hours since you dropped out of the summer cohort." "That's actually what I wanted to talk about, Professor," I said, stepping fully into the room and closing the door behind me. I kept my posture submissive, playing the role of a regretful, broke student. I made a mistake." Connor let out a short, mocking laugh. "A mistake? You basically called me a human trafficker in the dorms, Davis. Now you want back in?" "I was stressed about my CPA exams," I lied, letting a tremor of desperation enter my voice. "But I'm working at a local accounting firm for minimum wage, and I saw Tyler's new car on Instagram. I saw Jenna's yacht. I have $40,000 in student debt, Connor. I need an in. I know you're recruiting for a winter cohort. Good. Play to his vanity. Holloway whispered in my ear. Connor leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked at Higgins, then back at me. The winter cohort is highly exclusive, Alara. We are only taking the absolute top tier. People who understand discretion. People who don't ask annoying questions about routing numbers. I understand, I said quickly. I handle sensitive financial data at Henderson's firm all day. I know how to keep my mouth shut. I even noticed some interesting corporate structures you set up with Apex Consulting. Very clever. The silence in the room became absolute. Professor Higgins froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Connor's relaxed posture snapped rigid. His eyes darkened, scanning my face for any hint of a threat. I had just dropped a bomb, and I prayed the shrapnel wouldn't hit me. What do you know about Apex Consulting? Connor asked, his voice dropping an octave. The frat boy facade was entirely gone. This was the cartel recruiter speaking. Just that it's a very efficient way to funnel overseas revenue without triggering federal tax brackets, I said, feigning professional admiration. Like I said, I'm an accounting major. I appreciate good structure. I want to work for people who know how to build empires. Higgins cleared his throat, looking distinctly terrified. Connor, perhaps we should evaluate Ms. Davis's application for the winter term. No, Connor said, standing up slowly. He walked toward me, invading my personal space, until I could smell his expensive cologne. Nobody gets a second chance in this industry, Alara. You burned your bridge. Now I suggest you go back to your little minimum wage desk and forget the name, Apex Consulting. Because people who poke their noses into corporate tax structures tend to find themselves in very unfortunate legal trouble. Or worse, Higgins muttered, almost to himself. I widened my eyes, playing the terrified co-ed perfectly. I didn't mean to offend. I'll just go. Yeah, Connor whispered, leaning down so his mouth was inches from my ear. You do that. And Alara, if I hear you've been looking up my LLCs again, I won't just ruin your credit score. I'll make sure you end up on a plane to a place where they don't have extradition treaties. Understand? Yes, I gasped, backing away and practically running out of the office. I bolted down the hallway, pushed through the double doors, and burst out into the crisp autumn air, gasping for breath. We got it! Holloway's voice rang in my ear, fierce and triumphant. He just threatened you with international relocation, and Higgins is an accessory. The wiretap caught him calling a UAE number 2 seconds after you left the room. You did perfect, kid. We have the domestic link. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. I sank onto a concrete bench, burying my face in my hands. The trap was set. Connor had just handed the FBI the smoking gun they needed to launch a coordinated international strike. But as I sat there, my burner phone buzzed in my pocket. Not a call from Holloway, a text message. I pulled it out. My blood turned to ice water. Unknown number. I know you're working with the feds, Alara. I saw you leave the J. Edgar Hoover building last month. Did you really think I wouldn't have eyes on the people who rejected me? I stared at the screen, the breath knocked out of my lungs. Connor didn't just have a money laundering operation. He had surveillance. Unknown. Number. If they raid the compound, my bosses have orders to execute every single intern before the authorities breach the doors. You want to save Mia? You have exactly 2 hours to bring that flash drive to the old boathouse on the lake. Come alone, or I make the call, and 20 kids die. The timeline hadn't just broken, it had violently derailed. In my past life, Connor was ruthless, but he wasn't this prepared. I had underestimated him. The game wasn't over. It was about to become a hostage situation, and I was the only one who could stop the execution order. The text message burned into my retinas. 20 kids die. My lungs seized, the phantom pain of a bullet echoing in my chest. The timeline had warped. In my previous life, Connor was a ruthless sociopath, but he was a middleman. He wasn't the one pulling the trigger on mass executions. He was the one who swept the ashes under the rug. But my interference, my FBI tip-off, had accelerated his paranoia. He had eyes on the J. Edgar Hoover building. He knew I was the leak. I had exactly 119 minutes to save Mia and 19 other students from being slaughtered in a desert 6,000 miles away. I couldn't call Agent Holloway on the burner phone. If Connor's cartel handlers were sophisticated enough to tail me in the city, they were absolutely utilizing Stingray devices to intercept local cell tower pings around the campus. If I dialed a known federal number, Connor's phone would alert him, and he would send the execution code before I even reached my car. I forced myself to breathe. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. I was not the terrified junior who bled out on a concrete floor anymore. I was the architect of their downfall. I sprinted back into Arthur Henderson's accounting firm, slamming the heavy glass door behind me and locking the deadbolt. Arthur was still at his Rotary lunch. I lunged for my desktop, bypassing the encrypted Wi-Fi and jacking the Ethernet cable directly into the motherboard. I didn't open an email. I didn't use an encrypted chat app. I opened a massive shared Google Excel spreadsheet that Holloway and I had used to log the metadata coordinates, a document sitting innocuous and active on a secure federal cloud server. I scrolled down to row 4092, far below the visible data. I changed the font color to bright red and typed frantically, "Connor has counter-surveillance. He knows about the feds. He has a satellite execution code for the Dubai compound. He demanded the drive at Oak Haven Boathouse in 90 mins. Do not send visible police. If he sees cops, he kills them all. You need to jam his signal and breach silently. I am going in alone." I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, watching the blinking cursor. 10 seconds passed. 20. Suddenly, a green cursor appeared in the cell right below mine. Holloway was monitoring the sheet. The green cursor typed, highlighting the text in neon yellow. "Understood. HRT scuba units are deploying via the lake. Drone overwatch only. We are coordinating with Interpol to jam all outgoing satellite transmissions in a 3-mile radius of your location. Keep him talking, Ilara. Give us 30 minutes to establish the net." I exhaled a shaky breath, deleting the cells entirely and clearing the version history. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a secondary decoy flash drive. It didn't contain the Oak Haven Syndicate dossier. It contained a massive zip bomb, a malicious script I had coded during my insomniac nights, designed to instantly brick any operating system it was plugged into and continuously broadcast its GPS coordinates. I grabbed my car keys, walking out into the crisp autumn afternoon. The drive to Oak Haven Lake took exactly 22 minutes. The lake was situated on the northern edge of the campus property, bordered by a dense, decaying pine forest. The old boathouse hadn't been used by the university rowing team since the late 90s. It was a rotting structure of warped wood, corrugated iron, and damp moss, jutting out over the murky, frigid water. I parked my Honda a quarter-mile up the dirt trail, crunching over fallen leaves as I approached the structure. The silence was deafening. There were no birds, no wind, just the ominous lapping of water against the rotting pylons. I pushed the heavy wooden door open. The rusted hinges shrieked, echoing across the empty lake. The interior smelled of mildew, gasoline, and raw fear. Light filtered through the cracks in the roof, illuminating dust motes dancing in the cold air. "Right on time, Davis." Connor stepped out from the shadows of an overturned rowboat. He was wearing a dark windbreaker, his perfectly styled hair unbothered by the damp air. But it was the cold, matte black Glock 19 in his right hand that commanded my attention. And he wasn't alone. Stepping out from the opposite corner of the boathouse was a man in a tan uniform. My stomach dropped into freefall. It was Deputy Kyle Carmichael, Jenna Carmichael's older brother. He was a local county sheriff's deputy. "Surprised?" Connor smirked, noticing my paralyzed gaze. "You didn't really think a college sophomore could run a multi-million-dollar domestic laundering operation without a little local muscle, did you? Kyle here ensures our campus packages don't get searched. And in exchange, his little sister gets to play a high roller in Dubai." "Jenna doesn't know you're holding her hostage," I said, my voice steady, despite the absolute terror radiating through my veins. "Does she, Kyle?" Deputy Kyle's face was a mask of grim resolve. "Jenna is making 30 grand a month, Ilara. She's fine. Connor is setting her up for life. You're the one trying to tear down everything we built because you were too weak to make the cut." "Toss the phone and the drive," Connor demanded, raising the barrel of the Glock to point directly at my chest, the exact spot where the bullet had torn through me in the previous timeline. I reached into my pocket, tossing my burner phone onto the wooden planks. Kyle stepped forward and brought the heel of his heavy combat boot down on the screen, shattering it into dust. "The drive, Ilara," Connor barked. I held up the silver USB stick. "You think I'm stupid, Connor. If I give you this, you shoot me. Kyle dumps my body in the lake with chains, and you fly to the UAE tonight." "Actually," Connor said, a terrifying, calm smile spreading across his face, "Kyle is going to find your body. Tragic suicide. The guilt of falsely accusing the university's brightest student was simply too much for you to bear. Now, put the drive on the barrel." "Or what?" I challenged, taking a half step backward toward the water's edge. "You shoot me, and then what? Holloway already has copies. The FBI already has the wiretap. You're a dead man walking, Connor." Connor reached into his windbreaker with his left hand and pulled out a bulky black satellite phone. "Holloway might have the domestic wire, but he doesn't have the jurisdiction to raid a sovereign industrial zone in Ras Al Khaimah. My handlers do. One push of this button, Ilara, and my guys in the compound flood the basement with sarin gas. All 20 of our classmates, dead, including Mia. I will burn my own empire to the ground just to watch you lose." He hovered his thumb over the green send button. "Now," Connor whispered, his eyes hollow and dead, "give me the drive and get on your knees." "You talk too much, Connor," I said, the fear evaporating, replaced by a cold, searing wrath. "You always did. You think you're a mastermind, but you're just a glorified frat boy playing with cartel money." Connor's jaw clenched. "On your knees, Davis." "You want to know why I backed out of the chat in May?" I asked, my voice rising over the sound of the water slapping the pylons. I wasn't just stalling. I was baiting him, giving Holloway's cyber team the seconds they needed to cast the electronic net. It wasn't because I found a local accounting job. It's because I audited the shell companies Professor Higgins set up for you. You really thought routing money through Apex Consulting was invisible? Higgins left a digital trail a mile wide. Deputy Kyle shifted uncomfortably, gripping his service weapon. Connor, just finish it. We need to go. Shut up, Kyle, Connor snapped, his eyes locked on me. Higgins is a coward, but he did what he was told, and so will you. I know what happens in that compound, I continued, projecting my voice. I know they take their passports on day one. I know about the electric cattle prods in the basement. I know you forced Mia to run romance scams, and when she refused, you had them lock her in a windowless room. Connor let out a dark, booming laugh. Mia? She broke weeks ago, Ilara. They all break. That's the beauty of the human psyche. You give them a choice between starving in the dark or stealing from an old lady in Florida, and suddenly, they're the Wolf of Wall Street. Your precious classmates are monsters now. They're making me rich. My breath hitched. The reality of his words slammed into me. I remembered the psychological torture. I remembered how survival instincts could twist a good person into something unrecognizable. You're a sick psychopath, I whispered. I'm a capitalist, Connor corrected. Last chance, Ilara. He raised the satellite phone, his thumb pressing down on the keypad. Goodbye, interns. Do it, I dared him, staring down the barrel of his Glock without blinking. Connor's eyes widened in brief surprise, before hardening into pure malice. He pressed the send button. He waited for the beep, the confirmation ping that the encrypted signal had bounced off the orbital satellite and reached the UAE compound. Nothing happened. The screen of the satellite phone flashed red. Error 404. No signal found. Network jammed. Connor aggressively tapped the screen, stepping closer to the open doorway to get a clearer line of sight to the sky. No signal. What did you do? Connor hissed, the first crack of genuine panic fracturing his arrogant facade. I didn't do anything, I said, a slow, vindictive smile spreading across my face. They did. Before Connor could even process my words, the water beneath the rotting floorboards exploded. 3 men in matte black wetsuits and tactical rebreathers shattered through the thin wooden planks like they were made of paper. Suppressed assault rifles were raised and locked on target before the wood splinters even hit the ground. FBI, drop the weapon. Drop it now. Simultaneously, the front doors of the boathouse were kicked entirely off their rusted hinges. Agent Holloway stormed in, flanked by 4 heavily armored SWAT operators, laser sights painting both Connor and Kyle with dozens of red dots. Kyle shrieked, instantly dropping his service pistol and falling to his knees, lacing his fingers behind his head in total surrender. Connor froze. He looked at the satellite phone, then at his Glock, his mind frantically calculating a way out. Don't do it, kid, Holloway barked, his voice echoing with absolute authority. I will put a bullet through your orbital bone before your finger twitches. Drop the gun. Connor looked at me. The realization that he had been completely outplayed by a college junior he had deemed beneath his notice shattered him. His hands began to shake. The gun slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the damp floorboards. 2 tactical officers slammed Connor against the corrugated iron wall, zip-tying his wrists with brutal efficiency. Holloway walked over to me. He looked at the decoy flash drive still gripped tightly in my hand. You okay, Davis? He asked, his rough voice softening just a fraction. I looked down at my chest. There was no blood. There was no bullet hole. I was alive. The loop was broken. I'm fine, I breathed out, my legs finally giving way. Holloway caught me by the shoulder, steadying me. "We jammed the signal just in time," Holloway said, pulling a radio from his vest. "Interpol and UAE Special Forces breached the Ras Al Khaimah compound exactly 4 minutes ago. They moved as soon as we established the blackout." Connor, who was being dragged toward the exit by the operators, thrashed violently. "You're dead, Davis. My lawyers will bury you. I have money. You have 20 counts of international trafficking, wire fraud, and attempted murder." Holloway interrupted, not even looking at him. "Get him out of my sight." As they hauled Connor and a sobbing Deputy Kyle out into the forest, I looked at Holloway. "Mia. Did they get Mia?" Holloway pressed his earpiece, listening intently for a long, agonizing moment. A grim shadow passed over his face. "They secured the compound, Ilara. The victims are alive." He paused, looking at me with a profound sadness. "But it's bad. What we found over there. It's going to be a bloodbath in the courts. Not just for the cartel. The fallout was apocalyptic." The raid on the Oakhaven University campus made national headlines for 6 months straight. FBI agents raided the business college, seizing hard drives and arresting Professor Higgins in the middle of a lecture. The dean was forced to resign in disgrace, completely ignorant of the syndicate, but guilty of turning a blind eye to the massive cash donations Connor had funneled into the alumni network. But the real tragedy wasn't the corrupt faculty. It was the scholars. When the C-17 military transport plane touched down at Andrews Air Force Base, carrying the 20 rescued students, there was no joyous reunion. There were ambulances, psychiatric evaluation teams, and federal prosecutors. Connor had told me the truth in the boathouse. They had all broken to survive the brutal conditions of the compound, to avoid the starvation and the physical beatings. The victims had turned on each other. The FBI's forensic accounting of the compound servers revealed a horrific truth. The syndicate had implemented a twisted hierarchy. Jenna Carmichael and Tyler Brooks hadn't just run the crypto scams. They had excelled at them. Desperate to escape the basement, they had willingly accepted promotions to floor managers. They were the ones beating the newer victims when quotas weren't met. They were the ones drafting the fraudulent scripts used to drain elderly couples' life savings. They had stolen millions, believing that if they just played the game long enough, Connor would let them go. Stockholm Syndrome morphed into active, malicious conspiracy. Because they were legal adults, and because the digital footprint showed them actively profiting and punishing others, the Department of Justice showed no mercy. May 2026, graduation day. The stadium at Oakhaven University was filled with proud parents, colorful banners, and the triumphant sound of pomp and circumstance. The sun was shining, painting the campus in a warm, golden glow. I sat in the third row, wearing my black cap and gown, the gold summa cum laude cords draped heavily around my neck. I looked at the rows in front of me. Out of the 25 students in Professor Higgins' original macroeconomics honors class, only 5 of us were sitting here today. 20 seats were conspicuously empty, a silent monument to a stolen future. The title of the New York Times exposed that morning had read, "By graduation, the whole class was charged with fraud. The Oakhaven Syndicate Story." Connor Hayes was currently sitting in a federal supermax penitentiary in Florence, Colorado, serving life without the possibility of parole. Higgins had taken a plea deal for 20 years. Jenna Carmichael, the girl who had rolled her eyes at me in the dining hall, had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for racketeering in wire fraud. Tyler Brooks got 10. And Mia, I scanned the bleachers, my eyes searching the massive crowd. I spotted her standing near the exit tunnels, flanked by her mother. Mia hadn't been charged. The federal prosecutors recognized her as a pure victim. She was the only one who had continually resisted the scamming, enduring horrific solitary confinement, rather than hurting innocent people. But the girl standing near the exit wasn't the vibrant, laughing best friend I remembered. She was painfully thin, her eyes haunted and vacant, jumping at the sudden cheers of the crowd. After I walked across the stage and grabbed my diploma, I bypassed the celebratory photo booths and walked straight toward the exit tunnel. Mia saw me approaching. She didn't smile, but she didn't run away. Mrs. Thompson squeezed my hand tightly, tears in her eyes, before stepping back to give us space. "You made it," Mia whispered, her voice fragile, like dry autumn leaves. "We both did," I replied softly. Mia looked out at the sea of graduating students, her gaze distant. "I still hear the generators, Ilara. At night, I wake up and I think I'm still in that room." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I allowed a tear to slip down my cheek. "But you're not. You survived. You didn't let them turn you into a monster. That makes you stronger than anyone else on this campus." Mia looked at me, a flicker of genuine gratitude breaking through the trauma in her eyes. "You tried to warn me. I'm sorry I didn't listen. It's over now," I promised her. We hugged, a fragile, careful embrace of two survivors standing on the wreckage of a timeline that should have killed us both. Later that evening, I stood by the edge of Oak Haven Lake. The police tape around the old boathouse was torn and weathered. I took the small, silver lavender air freshener from my dorm room, the scent that had grounded me the second I woke up in this life, and tossed it into the murky water. I had been reborn to stop a tragedy. I couldn't save their souls, but I had saved their lives. The group chat was deleted. The syndicate was dust. And for the first time in 3 years, I could finally breathe. The truth about the global ecom scholars is a chilling reminder that not every glittering opportunity is gold. Sometimes it's a cage. My classmates traded their freedom for a fake Dubai dream, and the price they paid was their humanity. If you were shocked by the twists, the betrayal, and how Connor's empire collapsed right on graduation day, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends so they know the red flags of fake internships. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you got that WhatsApp message? Stay safe, and see you in the next story.